All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with Clayton Stenson. Clayton, welcome. So awesome to have you on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kevin. I'm excited.
You bet. I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to this. And I want to start off by giving a shout out to Nick Saylor because he was the one that introduced you and I. And without him, we might have never met. And I,
Yeah, for
I
sure.
will I'll tell you, anytime anybody comes through, somebody like Nick, and Nick saying, Kev, you should really talk to Clayton and talk about doing an interview with him for your podcast. Man, I mean, it goes right to the front of the line, and I'm because man, I just love who Nick is and how he shows up, and any and I totally trust his recommendation, and so
Yeah.
and of course that speaks volumes about the power of right relationships, which is
Yeah,
what this is all
absolutely.
about. And so
Nick's a great guy.
yes, he
Appreciate him a
is.
lot.
Yes, he is. So, and well, so what I'll do, to start off, well, I'll just start off with a nice, simple, easy question to start, Clayton. What do you do and who do you serve?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do really two things. I'm what's called a fractional integrator or fractional COO, I guess would be
Okay.
another way, chief operating officer. I do it in an interim role, usually. Companies running on the entrepreneurial operating system, usually companies 5 to 20 million revenue. That's part of what I do. But the thing that I'm most excited about is I coach visionary entrepreneurs and their second in command on their relationship, and just really do a lot of webinars and workshops and different programs to help them to learn how to work together because they're very different and sometimes don't see eye to eye.
Gotcha. So, how did you happen to get into this kind of work, Clayton?
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's an interesting. I never went to school for it.
Uh-huh.
I don't have a business degree. I have a phys ed degree, actually, interestingly enough. And I just ended up working at an organization with a visionary. And I don't know what it is about me, but I just always seem to uh, just adapt to whatever the organization I'm working in needs.
Hmm.
And that organization desperately needed structure and systems, processes, training, those kinds of things.
Okay.
And so it was my first role as a in an office, into in an office type of a role. And I just found myself solving those problems. And over time, I just got more and more responsibility along those lines, had more and more influence and more people under my leadership, and uh, yeah, so just kind of evolved into that kind of a role, and I was good at it. So they just kept saying, "Well, this part of the organization isn't working very good. Clayton, can you step in and help with that?" And so over time, the role expanded, and then the next organization I was in. I learned about the entrepreneurial operating system, and of course, the conversation with the visionary entrepreneur that owned it. He told me he wanted me to be his integrator, and so I didn't know what that was at the time. He's like, "Well, read this book. It's called Traction, about the entrepreneurial operating system," and I read it and I loved it, and so I accepted that role, and that was my kind of my first official chief operating officer integrator type of a role. So that's kind of how it happened. It wasn't really intentional. It was just really there was a need, and I enjoyed it and was good at it, and so I just kind of evolved into it.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. So, um, what's a result that you helped one of these companies get? You don't have to name names here, but what's a result
Mhm.
that you helped them get that you're just incredibly proud of, Clayton?
Yeah, I would say that first integrator role that I just mentioned. We were about 8 million revenue and 20 employees. It was a good group of people, but
Uh-huh.
we weren't very profitable.
Okay.
I think we were. I remember correctly, it was just like 0.2% profitable as a construction company. And the owner was pretty frustrated. And
Okay.
after I was promoted to that role, we started self-implementing EOS and just really doing the foundational tools and, just really coaching people and casting vision and solving issues. And within 12 months, we improved our profitability. I think it was like 4.4% or something, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in commercial construction, like 4 or 5% is about as good as it's going to get,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it is quite a competitive field.
Hmm. That
Yeah.
what, but still, I mean, like you said, that's a pretty powerful result when you
Hmm.
consider the industry that you're in and stuff, and
Hmm.
that not
Hmm.
just anybody's going to pull that off, you know.
No. Yeah, and I think that the thing I loved about it, or the thing I'm most proud of, is that we didn't have any turnover in that time, which normally, in my experience now, like fast forward, uh, I've seen that typically there's quite a bit of turnover when you start to introduce a new system into a business, because you're removing gray area.
Hmm.
Uh, and typically there's some people that like to hide in the gray area or don't like the changes that come. And so I'm pretty proud of the fact that we did that in a very healthy way and that everyone engaged and was excited for the changes. So,
Yeah. So
mhm,
what inspires you most about, holding this role as an integrator and making the impact that you get to make, Clayton?
mhm. I think I don't know if I'd put it in I'll put it in a little bit different way. The first visionary that I worked with, I found it very hard.
Okay.
I worked there for 7 years. And I joke that I wanted to quit probably every month of that 7 years, because I just found it very challenging because he was very different from me and I didn't understand him at all. And I didn't feel like I was appreciated for what I knew or what I brought to the table. And what excites me most and like drives me the most is to help people not go through that. To help an integrator or a second in command, whatever you want label you want to put on it, um, to just really avoid that, right? Through healthy boundaries and healthy communication, emotional intelligence, all the things that I coach them on. And then the other thing that I feel like really drives me too is seeing the impact on the team,
Okay.
right? Because in my experience, your company, the people in your company become like the leaders,
Mhm.
right? And so if I can help to create healthier leaders and healthier relationships at the top, it creates healthier people throughout the organization, which then also ripples out to the families that are involved in the communities that those people live in. So um, for me, it's much bigger than like profitability and company success. It's more like the people. I care about the people, and I want to see them happy and fulfilled and excited to work where they work. So.
Well, so how long have you been doing this kind of work now, Clayton, as holding this integrator role?
Yeah, so it's been 8 years
Eight
now
years
that I've
now.
been doing
Okay.
this kind of thing. Yeah, and
Okay.
then 4 years I've been doing the coaching of the VI Duo, the visionary
Okay.
integrator. Yeah,
And so is that pretty common in your experience after 8 years now that, that there's that, like, maybe, I don't know how I describe it, that disconnect between the visionary and the integrator. Is that what you were describing? Is
yeah.
that pretty common and stuff then?
Oh, it's very common. It's interesting when I talk to people, even like just in my church who maybe aren't a visionary or an integrator, and I talk about those two roles. Like I would explain it as the visionary entrepreneur is usually, they're very good at ideas, they're very driven, they're very good at sales, they're good at solving big problems and building relationships. And then you have the integrator who's like logical, process oriented, detailed, usually good at leading people, and good at running the day to day. When I explain that to people who aren't in business, that maybe are just an employee, usually they say, "Oh, yeah, 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 we have that." Right? Like
You're like,
they
and I
just
know who those two people are.
yeah, there and I explain that, what I do is help them to work together and understand each other better and speak each other's language, and they're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, we could use that." Right? Because they see that the friction and the challenges that those two people have. And it's not, and I compare it a lot to a marriage, right? Men and women are very different. They see the world differently, and there's, because of the different ways they see the world, there tends to be conflict, right? And it's not a bad thing. It's a normal thing,
Yeah,
but it is something we have to learn how to navigate,
yeah,
right? And in order to have a healthy relationship. So yeah, it's very common, and most of the companies that I work and coach with are running on EOS, and it's a very common thing that is discussed in those circles too. Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So, okay, so now that we've got a little bit of context set here, I want to switch gears just a little bit,
yeah, yeah,
and I want to like start talking more about the relationship side of this. And so,
yeah, for sure.
have you ever been introduced to a person or persons who completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today, Clayton, wouldn't be possible if not for this person or persons? And I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
Yeah, absolutely, multiple times. Um, I'd say the first one was that first visionary
Okay.
that I talked about. He was actually the pastor of my church.
Okay.
And I wasn't a church goer. I wasn't a person of faith prior to meeting him. And through, that relationship, I came to faith, and I came to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. And so that changed my life. And also it was my first office job. It was my first like real place where I was put in a position of authority to do things that I never had before,
Okay.
right? And had the opportunity to learn kind of in the trenches leadership. Like
Mhm.
I think I had a tendency towards leadership prior to that, but it was, that first opportunity where somebody like gave me something that I probably didn't earn. They had, they trusted me, to do something that I'd never done before. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow,
yeah,
very cool,
yeah,
very cool.
yeah,
Put their trust and put their faith in you, and
yeah,
yeah, yeah. I've had experiences like that, and you know when somebody does, I was like, I remember the first time I ever got hired on a fishing boat to go to Alaska, and the skipper John Waddell, the captain, was like, man, he said, Kevin, I've never hired anybody like this before, and I'm just praying to God that this works out for both of us, and I'm like. You know what? I'm just saying, man, I'm not going to let this guy down. I'm going to bust my butt for this guy, because I just
yeah,
appreciate him giving me the opportunity. And man, I had no idea what I was getting myself into.
yeah.
It was some serious work, but it all worked out,
Yeah, it was the same. It was the same. It was an incredible season of learning and growth, and very challenging. And but there's no chance that I'd be doing what I'm doing now if I wouldn't have had those 7 years working with him.
Yeah, yeah, that's fantastic. So you
Yeah,
mentioned you got a few other people you want to mention, so I want to make sure that you get the opportunity to honor them too.
yeah. I think the second one would be that second visionary that I worked with, because again, like he knew me. He attended the church that I worked at, so he knew me a little bit more. So it wasn't like a blind opportunity when he promoted me to integrator, but he's the one that gave me that book traction, right? And he's the one that introduced me to the system, and really kind of began me on the process of understanding why I felt the way that I did with that first visionary, right? Like he introduced me to the system that helped me to get some healing and learn how to have a healthy relationship with a visionary. So
Yeah,
yeah,
very
yeah.
good.
And
Very
again,
good.
some trust there, right? He
Yep.
actually, when he promoted me to integrator, um, he essentially said, "I suck at this stuff, Clayton. Like you do it. I know you'll be good at it." And then he went and bought another company, and he went and that company needed him much more than the one I was running. So he went and really took on that challenge and fixed that company and let me run with the one that that I was involved with. So
Okay.
yeah, again, a great guy. He really challenged me as well along the way, and I made some mistakes in some of those early years, but he was very gracious, and also I'll just say too, I went through a pretty tough time with some mental health challenges while I was there, and he was just awesome during that time. Even though he had never had mental health challenges, he was just very appreciative, very gracious, and gave me some space to work through some of that stuff. So it was
That's
good.
awesome. That's awesome.
Hmm.
So it just gave you more of an opportunity to just keep, just using and refining and learning and like
Yeah.
you said, making mistakes. And sometimes, sometimes our mistakes can be some of our biggest learning lessons too and stuff.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. And one of his things he said that I loved is he said like I was estimator before I was integrator with his company, and I missed something on an estimate, and I can't remember. It was more than $10,000 what I missed, and I felt horrible. I felt so bad. And he said, "Well, it's tuition." And I said, what do you mean? He's like, "Well, you're never gonna make that mistake again, are you?" I was like, he's like, "Well, it's tuition. You learned something now, and it's gonna change you." And he knew how bad I felt. So I think that's wisdom as well. Sometimes people are aloof about it and seem like they don't care. You might take a different approach, but when someone cares deeply, and they're torn up about it, like just, giving them grace is the right way to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, there's a
Yeah.
couple more people I want to make sure you get to honor here too. This is good. This is really good, Clayton.
Yeah, I think there's two friends. It's interesting how people come into your life, and they maybe don't stay forever,
Mhm.
right? But they come in, and maybe they play a huge role for a season, and then maybe they grow apart or they move away or whatever. So there's one, his name is James. Him and I, we went for coffee every second week for 10 years.
Wow. Wow.
And like it was not perfectly, every same night of the week or whatever. It was a little bit hit and miss at times, but it was very consistent for 10 years. And uh, it was interesting because we had very similar roles. Both of us obviously switched, businesses during those 10 years, but we had similar types of roles. And it was amazing how, there was nights where we'd get together and it was all about James, right? Like James was going through something and he needed to talk and he needed to vent, and I needed to be the sounding board and the support for him. But then the next week it would be Clayton's issues, right? That we're going to talk about, and he's going to listen and he's going to support. And it was just incredible, the depth, right, of relationship that we developed over those 10 years. And now, like, we don't see each other as much now, but we still, like, every time we connect, right, it's like, because of the depth we had,
Yeah.
it just feels like you just pick right up where you
Yeah.
left off.
Yeah.
Like the last couple weeks ago we were texting, and yeah, and it was just a great conversation, even though we haven't really connected as much lately. And then similarly, another guy, Dwayne, who's I'm kind of like that with now, probably the last, 10 years or so, very similar relationship where we've had similar roles, we've been able to support each other along the way. And, specifically though with this business, when I started my business, there were some ups and downs at the start. And I just recall multiple times where he talked me into not quitting.
Hmm.
Right. Like I remember one time in particular where I just texted him like, "Hey, I think I'm going to get a job." And his response was, "No, no, no, no." Right. He's like, "We need an emergency intervention meeting. Like, what are you doing tonight?" Right. And so just like people that believe in you enough that they will lend you their belief in seasons where you desperately need it.
Yeah.
If that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Mm.
And man, you're right. I mean, I've had those kind of friends too that have, been in your life for a season where you might have like been in really a lot of contact during that period.
Yeah.
And now, we don't have that much contact. But every time we do, it's like we pick up right where we left off and stuff,
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing.
and and so they it really is lifelong friendships. And who knows, you might get into another season where you're in contact with each other more. Maybe you will, maybe you won't,
Yeah,
but
both of those last two guys were actually in discussions about potentially buying businesses together and starting
interesting.
to work together again because we just have this deep level of trust and appreciation for what each other brings to the table.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so who knows what will happen, with those relationships, but yeah, like then they've both been referral partners and supporters of me on my journey
you
and
bet.
yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is an example of a situation where you personally, Clayton, got to make a really substantial impact, and maybe even in the moment, maybe even like surprise you a little bit, like, wow, look what I just was able to accomplish right there. Look what just happened right there. And yet you also know that that would have never been possible if not for your relationship with any one of the people that you've just talked about. What's an example of something like that?
Mhm. Well, I think um everything that everything that I do in my business now, um, but you want a specific example. Um, I guess in my coaching, there was a client about 3 years ago where the integrator was just really venting to me in a coaching session about how frustrated he was with his visionary. And I was able to understand what he was feeling because of, that first visionary that I worked with,
Mhm.
right? Because I'd been there and it felt like a lot of what he was saying could have been me, right? If he would have
Mhm.
talked to me 10 years ago, right? Or whatever the timeline was. And so it allowed me to hear him and validate what he was saying. Um, but then also give him another perspective because when I was in that role, I thought it was all him. I thought it was the visionary that made it hard. Like it was just the way he showed up and the way that he was that made my life hard. Uh, but the reality was that there was a lot of things that I could have done differently as well in that season that would have made the relationship better and made us work better together and me to be less frustrated. And so in that moment, I was able to just kind of challenge him. And what I said to him was, you know, uh, there's a Bible verse that says iron sharpens iron, right? So one man sharpens another. And so this guy's not a Christian, but I used that Bible verse and I said, when you have two strong people working together closely, they're going to bump up against each other, right? Like they're going to have moments where that happens. And, but I said to him, have you ever sharpened a knife? Right? Iron sharpens iron, right? Like, and he said, yeah. And I said, you know that if you get the angle right when you're sharpening a knife, you can make it razor sharp and it can do an amazing job. But if you get the angle wrong, you can damage the blade or chip it, right? And I said to him, when you bump up against your visionary, you feel like your angle is right,
Mhm.
right? Like, do you feel like the way that you show up is encouraging growth and unity, or something different? And his response was, my he thought about it for a minute and he's like, I could probably adjust my angle. And one thing in particular he said was that I tend to use my intellect because he's a very smart guy to attack when I don't get what I want. And I said, okay, well, that's not that. Thank you for being honest, but
Yeah.
that's not great, right? So what are you going to do about it? And he said, okay, yeah, I know, and I said, think about it, and then, but he didn't, and it turned out that he went straight to his visionary and he apologized for doing that. He owned it and he apologized, and that right away started to change their relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the visionary actually called me the next week and asked if I could coach them together because of what an impact that had made already. And so there's no way I could have done that
Yeah.
if it wasn't for the challenges that I went through with my
Yeah.
first visionary, because I knew that if he continued on the path that he was on, he would end up where I was, which is wanting to quit. He's like resentful and even bitter, and having to recover from that over time. So I was able to insert myself and be like, "Hey, you need to redirect, or you're gonna, you know, it's gonna end up poorly." And he did, and it was great. So
Yeah.
um, ended up being a great coaching relationship. The three of us jokingly call it marriage counseling for the VI duo, uh, and just facilitated some great conversations. And the two of them ended up working really well together, and still are. So yeah, so that's an example. Um,
Is
it's
that kind of how
amazing.
you refer to your coaching work today? Is marriage counseling for the VI duo? Is that kind of how you refer
Yeah,
to it?
jokingly, actually,
Mhm.
some other people do. Actually, when I explain it, people that are in the EOS world, they'll jokingly, it sounds like marriage counseling. And it's, yeah, it's kind of like that. It's
Uh-huh.
different, but similar.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You were getting ready to share something when I started asking you that, and I didn't want to.
I don't know what's going on.
Okay. Okay. That's all right.
If it comes back, I'll let you know.
Well, I mean, and like, but how awesome is that? That because you'd been there before, and he's telling you everything that he's feeling in his role as an integrator, which causes you to then go, oh yeah, I've been there, man. I feel you, I feel you, and when
Yeah.
people just know that we just get them, that we understand where they're at because maybe we've been there before and had some of those same kinds of experiences. It just brings us that much closer together, and it can happen so quickly too because there's that
Hmm.
shared bond.
Hmm. Yeah.
And because you'd been there and you're like, well, you know what, here's kind of what I found, when
Hmm.
I was
Hmm.
in this really painful spot and stuff.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and he just appreciates you sharing with him and stuff. You had
Hmm.
perspective that he maybe didn't have.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Absolutely.
powerful stuff,
Absolutely.
powerful
Hmm.
stuff. Well, for anybody listening to this and thinking like, man, Kevin, I really like Clayton, and maybe they're an integrator, or maybe they're a visionary, or maybe and they're just seeing like, yeah, we got some challenges here for sure.
Hmm.
But maybe they're just kind of thinking like, man, it might be worthwhile talking with Clayton, or maybe I know somebody that's kind of
Hmm.
dealing with some of the stuff he's talking about, and I want to get him connected with Clayton. Uh, what's the best way for people? Any websites, any resources we can share with
Yeah.
folks?
Yeah. My website's theunityguide.com.
Okay.
And I'm very active on LinkedIn. So if you message me on LinkedIn, I'd be uh, fairly quick to respond. I have a podcast that I'm just launching here in the next couple of weeks that is specifically interviewing people about the visionary integrator relationship.
Okay.
And it's very relaxed, conversational podcast where we get into people's stories and what worked, what didn't work, and what advice they have. And then I also have a series of webinars that I do pretty regularly. One for the visionary called "What Your Integrator Is Thinking But May Never Say Out Loud," uh, and it's really about some of the blind spots that entrepreneurs typically have, presented in a nice way. And then a second webinar that I do for the integrator called "The Silent Struggle of the Integrator: From
Okay.
Frustration to Fulfillment," because I find that a lot of integrators are the personality type that maybe they stay silent when they should speak up, and that eventually ends up bad for them, right? So we talk about some of the blind spots that they have, and some of the things that I've been through, again, just like I shared with that other guy,
Yeah.
to help them along the journey. And the goal with both of those is to get them to see the other person's perspective, and to really show up a little differently to improve the health of their relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, any last thing that you feel led to share, Clayton, before we call it a wrap?
Um, I think, yeah, I think, I never said this before, but when I was in university, I took a course which was called critical thinking, and which is kind of interesting that a phys ed program would have a course called critical thinking. I don't know if that's exactly the name, but essentially that's what it was about. And it was an amazing course that really made me think deeper about my beliefs and what's going on. And I think our society right now, it feels like we've forgotten how to do critical thinking and how to see the other side of a situation. And um, I guess in relationships, it's really important that we put ourselves aside and think critically, okay, this person's showing up in this way. Um, why could that be? Or even just be curious and ask, right? Rather than jumping to conclusions. Because I feel like a lot of problems can be solved just by, humbling ourselves and listening and asking good questions.
Yeah.
So I don't know why I felt led to say that, but I just think there's a lot that can be learned when we do that, right?
Yeah.
Like when we ask good questions and shut up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, one of my
But
mentors that I've had, Dan Sullivan, I mean, man, he
yeah,
is really great at asking questions that really make you
yeah,
think. And
yeah.
and you're right, man, just asking really good questions, we don't have to give unsolicited advice or anything. We just ask
No,
really
like
good questions and they start thinking for themselves.
yeah, and
It's
I think like sometimes like integrators get frustrated because the visionary won't let go, for example, and let them run it. Um, well, sometimes a good question is just to ask. I feel like you're not letting go. You know, can you tell me why? Right? Rather than just being frustrated, right? And not saying it, just ask the question, right? Like, I want to own this. I want to take this and truly be an integrator and own this seat. But I feel like you're holding back, letting go. What can you tell me why? Like, is there something that I could do differently? And is it something you're struggling with? And and vice versa, the same things can happen. Maybe there's a visionary that could ask a similar question to their integrator, and the those conversations that are require a little bit of slowing down and going deeper make a big difference, whether it's VI or duo or marriage, right, or friendship or whatever the situation is. You might discover something that changes your perspective, right?
You bet. You bet.
Mhm.
Well, Clayton, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to have this
Yeah,
conversation today. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you. And I'm excited to get this out there and share it with folks. I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs in my world that are going to really resonate with a lot of what you've shared here today. So thank you
well,
so
thank you.
much, man. Really
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks for having me. It was
it.
fun.
You bet.